Anyway, though, it is 5 o'clock, which also means it's wine o'clock.
Yeah.
So as I say, it's always 5 o'clock somewhere, but it's definitely 5 o'clock here in San Francisco. So I'm going to have some wine. And unfortunately, I don't have any of your wines to drink, but that is going to change very soon. But
We're working on
this
it.
panel's New Voices in Vermont for a reason, because you are all the up and coming stars. And I just want to say quickly, hello, and I'm Camila Bush. I'm the founder of Wine Fair and the Vineyard, and this panel, as I just mentioned, is New Voices in Vermont. The moderator is Whitney Pope. Whitney has been working in the wine industry for over 10 years. She is a certified sommelier. She is also a really fantastic writer. You can check out her blog and her Instagram account, Whit and Wine, to find out more about her, what excites her, and she's definitely a big champion of natural wines, based in Washington, D.C. So, Whitney, I'm going to let you take it away. Everybody, thanks so much, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pamela, and good evening and good afternoon or late afternoon for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled, and it is really an honor to be with this group of individuals and discussing Vermont wine, and these are really indeed the rising voices within the scene. Before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsor for the panel, Molly's Bottle Shop. So thank you for your kind donation and helping us to make sure that this is happening. If you are not just the normal P's and Q's and rules of play like any panel that we have, if you're not speaking, please kindly mute yourself. We will be doing questions later on, and so please drop your questions in the Q&A box and holler if you need anything. But enjoy. We do have 90 minutes together, and it's going to be a wonderful conversation. So as Pamela nicely and kindly introduced me, my name is Whitney Pope of Whit and Wine, and I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. So let's begin first with Willa.
Oh, okay. Hi. Oh, it's off the races. Okay. Hi, my name is Willa Deeley. I have a small label, like a tiny small label of cider-based wines at the moment, called Disciple. It's under the Lagargista umbrella, based out of Barnard, Vermont. I'm a full-time graphic designer and a part-time project-based freelancer for Lagargista, which is how I got my start working with them, and now I'm back. So yeah, I'm focusing on cider and piquette for the most part, but that's my program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's move to Kendra.
Hi, my name is Kendra Knapik, and I manage and co-own with my husband Rob Ellison Estate Vineyards. It's a 50-acre farm with about 10 acres, just over 10 acres under vine in Grand Isle, Vermont, in Lake Champlain Islands. And our winery is about an hour away in Stowe, Vermont. And yeah, we took over an abandoned vineyard about 3 years ago. The initial vines for our vineyard were planted in 2001. And we just released our first wines last fall. And I'm really excited and honored to be here today, talk about Vermont wine and be here with all these awesome people.
Awesome. Well, all right, we are going to move over to Justine.
Hi, everyone. I am really nervous, excited to be here and chatting. This is kind of our debut. And when I say our, I mean myself, Kathleen, and Grace. And, we'll all give you our little elevator pitch about ourselves and what we're doing. But I've been in food and bev for about 15 years, and we have recently joined together to form Calce Wine Cooperative, which is a negociant wine label here in Vermont. We're producing out of Franklin County, and yeah, can't wait to talk more about it.
Thank you, Justine. Cami.
Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can't see myself, and actually that's fine. Hi, everyone. My name is Camila Carrillo. I am of La Montañuela. I've been working in Vermont making wine for the past 3.5 years, working as the assistant wine grower for La Garagista. I started my own label 3 years ago in 2018. I'm very, very small. In 2020, I produced about 57 cases of wine. I did recently just close on 8 acres of land. So soon enough, I'll be planting vines and fruit trees. And yeah, I specialize in making oxidative styles of wines. I like making sparkling wines and also doing co-fermentations between grapes, apples, and plums.
Thank you so much. And then finally, we're going to hand over the mic to Grace, who is also with Kathleen Chery.
Thank you. Hi. We're together, which feels really special right now. Sorry.
Technical difficulties.
So I'm Grace Meyer. I'm one of the 3 founding partners of Calce Wine Co-op, which Justine gave a great introduction to before. I'm in Burlington, Vermont right now, and I am a born and raised Vermonter, grew up on an apple orchard. Really excited to be coming back to Vermont growing fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Chery. I'm also here in Burlington, Vermont. I am a Brooklynite, born and raised, but I'm out here in Vermont as a farmer and a winemaker. Been kind of in agriculture the past like 7 years at this point, kind of all over the country, New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, Oregon, kind of picking up the tools that we need to put this up. That's kind of really worked for us to join together and form Calce.
Well, thank you. Well, before we get started, I want to make sure everyone has something in their glass. I actually do have Camila's wine, so it's very exciting and how appropriate. I was able to snag a bottle at Domestique. So too, woo! No, so it's fantastic. And I haven't been able to try everyone's wine from this panel, but eventually would love to. Let's do a warm-up question to like just loosen up. I know you guys just introduce themselves. But I'm going to ask you each the same question. What does your typical day look like in your role? So I know you are growing, grapes, you're growing apples, you're growing other things. So what does your typical day look like? Who wants to start?
I can start because I'm going to cheat the question. So I think I love absolutely most of all about doing what we're all doing is that there's like no typical day I feel like ever. I love, being in the winery. I love being out in the field. In the last, 6 to 12 months, have been spending a lot of time behind a desk, which is maybe my least favorite, but trying to get a business up and starting. So if I had to choose, I'd say I'd like to be out in the vineyard and just zoning out. But
Awesome. Now, and Camila, you are smiling and you're right there in the middle of my screen. So I'm calling on you now.
Okay. I guess I have 2 typical days at the moment. For the most part, we've been out in the vineyard pruning, trying to finish that up. So yeah, just all day in the vineyard, listening to podcasts, and then breaking for a really nice lunch. But when we're in the cellar, we're doing anything from bottling, labeling, racking. So yeah, I guess there's 2 typical days, vineyard and cellar. But each of them actually consists of a really long lunch, and that's
and let's do this one together for Justine, Kathleen, and Grace. We'll change it a little bit and flip it on its head. As you have this new venture and the partnership, what is it that what's been the most gratifying thing so far that you've experienced?
I think one of the gratifying moments for us, or for me to speak, is like being able to work with different vineyards in the area, being able to like form a relationship with them in a way that's like really symbiotic. A lot of the vineyards out here are people that maybe don't have so much experience growing, but like want
their vines to be productive, and we have some experience, and we definitely want the vines to be productive so we can, use the grapes. So it's like this really great relationship that I think is forming. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely the fact that, and we'll probably talk about this more in the panel, but something that I think is really special about Vermont is that when you get out there and you do your thing, people want to help you. Like, and there's someone there for everything. So, our day-to-day right now is just wild. We're still have our other jobs, and we're in meetings all the time and trying to get all these formative documents and our site in place and all of that. And just, I don't think that there's been one step that we haven't had someone instrumental in helping us along that process. So that's like just heartwarming. And some of those people are in this panel right now.
Yes.
And that's been my favorite part.
Totally. I really appreciate this moment for us as a startup where we have like a general direction where we're going, and we know that we want to make wine. We know that we want to have like a socially sustainable business. And so right now, I spend so much of my time just like reading and Googling and just like trying to find examples of just any company, any person that has something like inspiring to say, trying to find someone to copy off of, and like through that, it's been so, I just feel so much smarter, to be completely honest with you. Like, I feel smart and that feels good after a year of being a potato.
I absolutely love that. And that's a great way to end and transition to Willa.
I also have spent a lot of time Googling. Honestly, the bulk of my work in the spring tends to be research at this point. I spend most of my time is concentrated during harvest, since I'm doing apples and piquette and other fruits. And I'm, the way the winery is balanced, I don't really need a second person full time right now. So I dip in and out when it's convenient, and I'm working on my own project, but we're sort of trying to expand what we can do with what we like to call other fruits, which is the non-grape program. So I spend a ton of time doing research. I've been doing a lot of sugar trials lately with violets. I spend a lot of time foraging, sourcing. We get a lot of fruit from different people. It's, again, great thing about Vermont. There are a lot of people who have like 1 or 2 apple trees on their property who are pretty chill about giving you their apples because they don't care and they don't use them. So I'm trying to build up our network of access in that way. So most of my time is research and experiments at the moment. That's what my day looks like.
Excellent. Well, this is perfect because it's a segue into our next portion of our conversation. I asked the panelists to look over a couple of questions and really see what spoke to them. So we'll begin first with getting your start. Each of us has come to the wine industry from a very different path and have had a number of different experiences, whether those have been, maybe this is our second career or third career, it could be the fourth, what have you. But with each of our careers and all the random jobs that we may have had, they have definitely given us a toolkit to make us successful for where we are today. But I really would love to know from Justine and Kendra, how did you realize that you even wanted to be in the industry? What was your aha moment? Like, what brought you directly to begin the path, so where you are now?
Totally. So I studied social sciences in college because I've always been intrigued by people and languages and traveling. And so when I graduated with my BA in sociology and cultural anthropology, as well as a whole lot of debt and zero job prospects, both because of my major and because of the recession, I floundered really for a couple of years trying to find a place for myself, like in entry-level corporate America. And I realized that it wasn't a good fit for me. and, you know, between the dead end corporate jobs and like being drawn back to working summers at my uncle's seafood restaurant on Cape Cod, which is where I'm from, finally one day it just like clicked for me that food and drink is just as much culture as art and language and politics. So, you know, I knew I wanted to dive deeper into like this new cultural like outlet. So I moved to New York and I decided that I wanted to work my way into fine dining. And just like the lifestyle that you have access to working in luxury hospitality is completely intoxicating. So there's just like, you know, the adrenaline of a smooth service, the validation of like good sales numbers, and like the pride of hosting a group of people for an incredible food experience. Like, and all the while you're just like surrounded by uninhibited consumption and opulence. And I am a Libra, and I was just like, give me the glamour, you know? And so, you know, I began my formal wine education and then I started working as the maitre d' at a Michelin starred, like page 6 star-studded hotspot in the West Village. And, you know, I was like, I am on top of the world right now doing this. And I just leaned into it. And, you know, from there, I, you know, went from like restaurant operations, hospitality operations, but I was like, who am I kidding? Like, I don't need any of this other stuff, you know? I don't need any of like the human interaction as much anymore, like on the large volume of 1,000 cover a night restaurant. So I am lucky and privileged enough to now be able to, you know, focus on what I love, which is wine and natural wine.
Thank you. Now, Kendra, same question to you. When did you realize you wanted to be in the wine industry?
Yeah, so my path was a little bit, I guess, swervy. But my love of wine and my fascination of wine started back when I was in college. Actually, I took a wine tasting course, and I think it just stuck with me and became a student of wine. But it wasn't until I moved back to Vermont in 2011 that I really ever thought about becoming involved in the wine industry. And I actually moved back to Vermont for a professional job. I'm a veterinary oncologist by trade, and I love being a vet, but I started a family a couple years after I moved back here, and I quickly realized just the demands of my job, the schedule that I was working, that I didn't have the flexibility that I wanted to be the type of mom to be around for my children as much as I wanted to when they were young. And so I kind of took a step back and reevaluated like what I wanted to do with my life for the next 10 years, where I wanted to be in 10 years. And the first realization that I had is I really wanted to start my own business. And my family, I was raised in a family where my parents had their own business and they were really flexible. And I just, you know, having my own children made me realize I really wanted to build something. And I think there was also like a creative part of my personality and myself that I just wasn't able to explore as much as I wanted to with my current work. And it was actually, I went to a friend's 40th birthday party in Annapolis, outside of Annapolis, Maryland, and it was at a winery called Doden. And I just remember talking with the owner about viticulture and his winemaking and the business side of it. And I think I just left fascinated. And I came back. I had concurrently also moving back to Vermont, noticed more and more vineyards being just around the state. And I went to college in upstate New York, so I knew a little bit about cold climate viticulture. And I just started to get curious. So the culmination of all these things, I signed up for a viticulture course at UVM, which I had seen offered over the years. I was pregnant with my third child at the time, me and a bunch of undergrads. And I just fell in love with it. And I actually, through that course, it's a funny story, but I was presented with this opportunity to buy this vineyard that had been abandoned. And it was in the area of Vermont where I spent a lot of my childhood. And it's a long story short, but I also had some crazy pregnancy complications. I almost lost my third son and went through kind of like, you know, a little bit of an existential crisis. And I think, you know, we had started talking about buying this property before that, but I think that at the same time really just made me reassess my life and take a total crazy leap of faith and purchase this have this vineyard. So yeah, it's been a crazy 3 years, but loving it.
I love that. That is a perfect, I think everyone tries to force themselves on a certain path. You realize that maybe, exploring it academically like you did, this was something you're super interested in, you wanted to know more, and that was driving for you. But what put you over the edge was beyond your academics. It was really centered in your own personal experience. And I would love to hear from Grace, along with Kathleen. What is it outside of academics has given you the chance to transition and move your career, and like what has given you the tools to be successful today?
All right, I'll start. So this is kind of an easy question for me because I never felt comfortable or like I thrived in a classroom setting. I, as I mentioned before, grew up in an apple orchard, and my folks put me to work just because it was so busy in the fall, and they're like, we need you in our line of sight and you're going to be useful too. So at 7, I was running the register at the farm, and also I would do the farmer's market and run the register there. There might have been some tactics in there too from my parents about like an adorable little girl, but I learned math. It was great. And from there, it went on from like extensive childcare to retail work. Then I got into waiting tables, and then I kind of was like, oh, I should go to college, right? But I want to do music production, so I'm just going to go work in it. Then fast forward to Austin, Texas. I have a job in music production, which really was bartending because that's how I made money. And then I was like, I am realizing while I'm in Texas how disconnected people are with their food, which was such a big part of how I grew up. So I want to go back to Vermont, and I want to learn, maybe I'll go to school for local ag. And I come back and I got a job in a marketing firm, then a nonprofit where I was for 7 years doing local food advocacy. So I kind of just skipped the whole academic thing down the line. And so my work experience, though, is what has driven me to what we're doing today. From all of that, I learned a few things. One is that I like to be on my feet. I like to want to be on the computer when I get on the computer. And I wanted to do something for myself. But especially in the last few years, I've worked managing younger folks in, college and recent grads. And I'm so proud of them. It's been really delightful. They ask for what they want. And they're really clear about boundaries, and I just I can't get enough of it. However, I'm going to sound like an old folk here. I think I had none of that in my work experience. And I had some really, really terrible jobs that I stayed at for way too long. However, that experience really, every time I was in a position, every time I had a terrible boss, most of the time, I just kept working in my head, like, how would I do this differently? And, what do I want to do? What are the important things here? Like, how are you a good boss? And by the time we came to developing Calce, I had already kind of developed the cooperative principles internally. And it was just this perfect fit, and such a godsend that it was already a form of business, a worker co-op, right? So all those principles, all the cooperative principles were already things I knew I couldn't really start a business without. And luckily I have 2 great partners who also feel the same way. But I'd say that honestly, the bad jobs got me to where I am today. And I feel really firm in my belief of the cooperative principles, and really excited that this could work for a winery, especially in Vermont.
Perfect. Everyone has their bottom, and it's just taking that opportunity. It has the job that kills you, that you're like, this is the thing that's going to get me out of this situation. It really is the fire that you need, frankly, under your ass to make change. Kathleen?
Yeah, right on to that question. So I was an English major. So obviously, very, yeah, okay. So kind of all of my job experience outside of school has helped prepare me for my career. Somewhere along the line, I got interested in agriculture. And I would say the really intense situations of jumping into like working on a farm with I'm a city kid, and I just like threw myself into working on a farm one year because I was kind of curious about it. And I think working on projects where everything went wrong. So my first year working on a vegetable farm, we had like a 250 member CSA, and like right in the middle of harvest, 4 out of the 6 interns decided to leave the program. And so it was myself and this younger gentleman who we were both from New York. It was both our first season, and we were put in this position to people signed up for the CSA, we got to feed them, and we have to figure out what we're doing, along with our supervisor, of course, but we were the people on the ground. So those instances taught me so much, because you just have to step up to bat and hope for the best, but also put your whole self into it. And so, yeah, I think continuing with that ag thing, working at different scale wineries, working for a newer winery that's smaller, seeing how to scrap together to make a product with the means you have, and then working for a bigger winery that has everything, anything that you could wish for, they have it, and it's wow, that's how you do it right, So I think taking all of that experience, and then as we're starting our new business, being able to find that medium to see how can we scrap a little bit, but what can we also really use that would make the goings better. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah.
Perfect. And Willa.
Okay, so I'm going to use the word capitalize.
Willa, I'm going to unmute you. Yep, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to use the word capitalize a few times, and I don't want to freak anybody out because I know that's a hot button word, but I think when used in the right context, it makes sense. So I'm really lucky. I grew up across the street, I guess, from La Garagista, from Caleb and Deirdre. My first job in high school when I was 16, 17, I worked in their kitchen. I bussed tables, I washed dishes, I made pizza, I did all the stuff that happened. And it was really nice. It was a really small operation. It was myself and the two of them and sometimes one other person. So I really got to watch how a really small operation could run a tightly knit business and make money. And they were really, really committed to the idea of I don't want to say farm to table. It was just they had a farm and they had a restaurant, and they wanted to do things and funnel them through that channel because Caleb loved to farm and it's economical to do it yourself. And I really started to learn the value of what it means to capitalize on land. If you're lucky enough to have access to land or to have proximity to land, you can do a lot with it. There's a lot of great farmland that's being converted into vineyard land now in Vermont, which is awesome. But there's like I've mentioned earlier, there are a ton of different, residential properties that have 1 or 2 apple trees on them, or they have rhubarb bushes, or they have fruit trees of any kind, or berry bushes. And there's a lot of opportunity for people to capitalize on what is around. And there's a very strong sense of community in Vermont. And if you can, figure out how to ask for stuff and put yourself out there and try to get the idea across to people that you can take something they have and make a great product out of it, and you're minimizing waste, and you're not bringing deer to their property, and you're keeping ticks further away. There's a lot of benefits to advantage of what you have, and I really learned the value of that from a very young age. Growing kale is super important, but it's also just as great to use the dandelion leaves to make salad. You can make beautiful salad with that, and that's really, really has stuck with me. I kind of lost that for a long time in my life. I never thought I would move back to Vermont. And, I ended up back after I graduated in college. And I was just like, had a just total eye-opening experience of how lucky I was to grow up here and have access to land and just all of the things you can do with that. So that I just feel like I learned how to capitalize in the right way.
Perfect. Your existence, and it's the way that you needed to go full circle. You had to leave, experience very different things, and now you're coming back and you're back to the land and you're creating a community, as we have here with a number of folks, but you're also creating this own ecosystem on the land that you are looking to improve and make sure that it's not just one way output, that it's fully circular. That is perfect. And we are bringing our way over to Camila to round it out before we move on.
Okay. So I never went to college. And I got into wine when I was a senior in high school, which is a story for another day. So after I graduated high school, my plan was to just take a year off to kind of figure out my life, which resulted in me just never going to college. But I knew that I really liked wine and I wanted to pursue something in it. So I had to get creative. At that time, though, everyone was telling me that if I wanted to get into winemaking, that I had to go to college, I had to get all these degrees. And I was just not interested in doing that. I was really stubborn and I refused to believe that that was the only way. So I've been in the wine industry now for 10 years. And the first 5 years I dedicated to working in wine shops, wine bars, and tasting rooms, and expanding my palate. So tasting and expanding my palate has been super beneficial, especially as a winemaker. And also in 2015, I started doing harvest internships. So I did that for about 2.5 years, bouncing between hemispheres. And I think that was probably the most beneficial education outside of an academic place to learn. And it's really benefited me today. I worked in conventional winery, in minimal intervention and natural. So I kind of got to see what winemaking was like behind the scenes across the board, which was really important. And now I've been working with Deirdre and Caleb for 3.5 years, which has been probably the most important thing to see what happens year round in a vineyard and in a winery. It's definitely helped a lot with me doing my own projects. I'm very much still a student and still learning. So there's a lot I don't know, which is why I'm really grateful that I still get to do my project, but also work full time with Deirdre and Caleb. So.
Perfect. And we'll let's discuss, now that we have seen and heard from each of you about how you created your own path to be here, working in wine and working ciders, what have you. I'm sure there have to have been a number of challenges as you have a startup or business, whether that's been established for 3 years or something that's, less than 12 months old. So can you tell us what are the unique challenges that you've experienced as a Vermont winemaker? And this is open for everyone. So I'd love to have it that it's in full conversation and we can volley back and forth. Kendra, would you like to begin, or Justine?
Sure. I can jump in. We can take this question a lot of different directions, but I think a challenge that we all face is just the lack of education and understanding about Vermont wine and cold climate wine, and specifically hybrid grapes. And just this kind of barrier, either people in the wine world might, kind of think of hybrid grapes as, and I can say this because I am one, like the redheaded stepchild. And then people who maybe don't know as much as wine just think, oh, you make wine in Vermont, is it sweet? So, I think that is something that we all face for sure. And I know we're going to get more into hybrids, but that would be my biggest challenge.
I can take it in another direction and just go with temperature. Honest to God, I have Raynaud's. I grew up in Vermont. I love the fact that we have 4 seasons. It's great, but I freeze my actual behind off when it's really cold, and I feel like I am constantly evaluating whether or not my Whitney. Oh.
Apologies about that. Somehow I ended up being muted.
No.
You know, there has to be one technical glitch, and just let it be on my end. We can move on to another question, but if there's anyone else that would like to continue what Kendra was addressing with challenges that you faced.
Did you guys hear my thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you hear me, Whitney? Oh yeah.
You're
I think that's cold. I'm not on.
I think that, yeah, what Kendra was saying about, you know, people not necessarily ever having heard of like the state of Vermont, or like being able to like point it out on a map or be able to like compare it to anything else. You know, we are pushing the boundaries of latitude. And some people think that, you know, that pushing is unnecessary, you know, like I feel like, you know, when I talk to friends who live in, you know, California or Oregon, it's kind of just like, you know, but like how many other people are really doing that? How do you think you could really be successful if there are, you know, if there are only like 10 wineries? You really think that all 10 of them are going to be successful? But I do. Spoiler alert, I do. Yeah, and it ties back to the whole like agricultural culture of Vermont, you know. There's such a community here. People want to see small businesses succeed. There is a culture of you know, really shopping local, like knowing the person who processed your cow, the person who you buy your eggs from, you know, you go and get your own, you know, allium from like an abandoned field the next town over. It's like people are tight with the things that they put in their body, and I think that that is one of the benefits.
Yeah, so you all are making the push for Vermont is not just the home of Bernie Sanders, ice cream and maple syrup. I was fully unaware of just the depth and history prior to joining this panel of how much agriculture, like how important agriculture is for this society. Let's move to the next question. So it's been mentioned, hybrids, and that will be a perfect transition for, you know, climate change. It is probably the most urgent thing that we have facing us as we're hearing, kind of heading out of COVID-19. We still have, you know, whatever waves are going to be in front of us. But as winemakers, with hybrid grapes like Vidal Blanc and Marquette, they've been grown for decades within Vermont. What do you think is the role for hybrids, both domestic and abroad? And I'm just going to call on Willa.
Perfect.
Wait, me? Or Camila? You say Willa? Oh, sorry. Then the names are backwards. I would say I can try answering this question. I probably have the least amount of hybrid grape farming experience personally. But you know, what are the roles of hybrids? I mean, hybrids do really well. I mean, part of the reason they were developed, I believe, was to help deal with the phylloxera issue, or they helped deal with that. I actually don't know like the deep personal history. I probably should, but I grew up, you know, like watching people make wine with hybrids. I grew up across the street from Caleb and Deirdre. So hybrids are really, I mean, I learned more about other types of wine outside of that when I went to study. So I grew up with hybrids, which is a really funny situation for most people. It's not like the first thing they think of. And they were planted because they do well. They're, you know, they're cold, hardy. They are very functional in terms of how they grow in Vermont. And I think it's really important that people are transitioning and spending more time thinking about how they're farming and choices about, you know, more minimal intervention farming, growing crops that will do well in that benefits the planet. It benefits us. It's, you know, we're not putting chemicals in our body. Farmers aren't breathing chemicals that they spray. And hybrids, I mean, not that you have to do it everywhere, but hybrids just in Vermont do really well. And they, you know, they're sturdy. You treat them well, they do well. They don't like to be treated with chemicals. I don't think most things do, but, you know, some things do more than others. And I think as we continue to see more and more realities of global warming, I mean, we talked about this in our panel meeting a few weeks ago, you know, like look at the continual year after year frost and hail they're experiencing in parts, you know, most of France now. It's expanding. There are places that are going to have to start changing what they grow, and you can grow hybrids pretty much anywhere. And the more that people talk about that and it's as a positive thing instead of this like bummer of a reality, the more people will be able to transition into that and the more acceptable it will be. So I think hybrids are sort of the like younger sibling that are trying to find their place, but they are, and it's happening, and global warming is not going the other way. So we will see more hybrids planted. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and you know, just to piggyback off of that, I really think that it's important, you know, for the future of the wine industry, we can't just keep putting all of our eggs in one basket. You know, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, like of course they're beautiful and of course they're classic, and classic has its place, but we can't keep trying to fit a square peg in a round hole when the playing field is completely different than when we started. Like, why are we trying to move Chardonnay around the world? You know, like, oh, maybe it'll be really great here. Maybe we can make it work here, when there is absolutely something that is either, you know, indigenous or something that is a better fit for that area. And I think that it sort of goes along with like the, you know, the globalization of everything else, where like, you know, we need to open up our minds and not just focus on what has been. We need to think ahead. We need to be 2 steps ahead and figure out what will be before we actually get there.
That's great. Camila, would you like to add anything, or Kendra?
I mean, I guess I would just like to add that I feel like Vermont is definitely leading in proving just how much hybrids can do, which I think is really important, especially during, you know, the climate crisis, where people have been kind of like hating on hybrids for so long and kind of putting them in this corner. And I just, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just really excited to be a part of this movement and to be able to really showcase just the variety of wines and styles you can make with hybrids. So I think that that's definitely really important given everything we're facing, and the fact that, yeah, like people all over the world are probably eventually going to have to start planting hybrids and replacing, you know, other vines. So I think, you know, I don't know. I think it's important to kind of see what's going on here and to just accept the hybrids and love them because they're amazing. I don't know.
I mean, I think you guys can hear me, right? Oh.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, I think I remember when I knew nothing 3.5 years ago, like learning about all these different new grape varieties, and it was just so fascinating and exciting to me. And there's like, I mean, really, I mean, the United States is really in its infancy in winemaking comparatively to many other places in the world. And you know, especially Vermont, and there's no basis for working with these wines, and it's super exciting to experiment with them and, you know, work together with the community to, you know, establish, you know, best ways to make wine out of these grapes. You know, and I think it's just too bad that they have had a, you know, a bad reputation. You know, I think of hybrid, sometimes this has this negative connotation, but really they're quite old. The concept is quite old, and it's just that, you know, this is a new wine industry and we're just establishing ourselves. And so I would love people to kind of switch their paradigm and that respect about the wines. So.
That's perfect. Thank you. We actually have our first question, and it's from Amanda Kimbrough. Aside from the well-known hybrids, are there any hybrids that winemakers think are great that we should expect to see in the market in the next few years?
I can answer because I just so in 2019 I worked with this variety that I'd never tried a wine made from it, and I don't think anyone in Vermont grows it. But I actually purchased the grapes from an organic vineyard in Walpole, New Hampshire. It's called Sabrevois, and I made like 10 gallons of it. So they're in really small bottles, all sold out. I'm sorry, but Sabrevois is, I think, a really cool grape. When we went to go look at it before harvesting it, it was like in pristine condition, just like really disease resistant and hardy, and super beautiful. So that's one that I would definitely recommend. And I for sure will most likely I'll be planting that, because yeah, it's awesome.
I'll put in a plug for St. Croix or St. Croix, or however you want to say it. So I feel like a lot of people, when we talk about red wine hybrids, a lot of people talk about Marquette, Frontenac Noir, which are fantastic grapes. But I think St. Croix is a little bit more... It's just a little bit more balanced and rounded, and the acidity is a little bit lower. It still has plenty of acidity, don't get me wrong, but you know, I'm slightly putting in a plug for it because I've had to work quite a bit of it, because about 40% of our vineyard is St. Croix, but it's really thin skinned. And so a lot of, I think, growers don't enjoy it because at harvest, it's just like, as soon as it's ripe, it's like the wasps and the ladybugs are in there, but and its bricks don't rise super high, but it makes a really lovely wine. We make a rosé from it. We make a still red that's really beautiful. We make a pet nat red wine and rosé. It's super great co-fermented with other red wine grapes too. So St. Croix.
Fantastic. Just want to remind everyone, so we are taking questions as we go throughout. So if you have any, please drop them in the Q&A box. But, you know, you can't have the conversation about hybrids without discussing co-fermentation, because that is really deeply part of the story here in Vermont. Can you tell us your experience with working co-fermentation? What have you seen as being, do you see it as a huge win for defining what Vermont wine is? Is there anything that's going to be confusing for the consumer or for the trade when it comes to selling it, that you want them to take away and have something in their mind of like, no, this is going to be the benefit, this is how you need to flip it to the consumer so there is more traction?
Can I take this one? Start. Yeah. So, I mean, co-fermentation, I think everybody thinks of two things now when we think of co-fermentation. Like Kendra was saying, you can co-ferment with other grapes, and then you can co-ferment with other fruits. And Brian McClintock of Vitical actually had a really interesting, he made a video a couple weeks ago talking about it. You know, there has been this concept for years, and this idea that wine is made from, like, the best wine in the world is made from one grape, and it's from one place, and it's all about like terroir and expression, but it's monoculture, and it's one thing, and it's classist, and it's limiting. And when the great thing about Vermont and co-fermentation is that we have all of these interesting hybrid grapes that do really beautiful things on their own, but they also do really dynamic things together. And they also do really well with a whole friggin' host of other fruits. People are continuing to experiment about what they can blend. And the important part about co-fermenting, I think, is that it allows more people, especially when you're co-fermenting with those fruits like cider, it allows more younger people to come in and be a part of the wine industry. It shouldn't just be like one single focused grape. Terroir is about place. And when you're making wine from a bunch of different things or a bunch of different grapes, you're still expressing place, because it's about all the other stuff that you're growing, you know, your cover crops, and it's growing around, and it's about the pollination. And I think that discussion is really important, you know, and if Vermont wants to be known for anything in terms of the idea of co-fermentation, it should be that there's more room for other people to come in and do it, because it means you can show up and make, you know, you can take, like I took 10%, I had grapes, I could only buy a very small amount of grapes from this great vineyard in Walpole, and I wanted to actually make something I could sell, and it was like 10% grape and 90% apple, and it works. And that's like, I got way more wine out of that, and it allowed me to like pay for my experience having done that. So it just makes it more affordable, which I think is really important if we're trying to diversify who's allowed to like come in and be a part of the program.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Grace.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on that 100%. And I've like flipped the question, because I think it's one of those things like how we're just going to evolve out of like having to be all tied up over pronouns and things like that. Co-fermentations, I'll start with hybrids. So, you know, hybrids in Vermont, the original wine growers here, we're trying to make those California wines. They were like, this is what we know. This is what, you know, we're used to. So we're going to try and replicate this with these wines, but really they need their own process. They need their own thing. And the answer to that is just making it and experimenting and getting it out there and having people try it. Because, you know, I worked at a bar where we served mostly co-ferments, and, you know, and people are so open to it. We just need to get it in their mouths, and they'll realize how beautiful it is. And I also think, I don't know, we're in a really lucky spot right now where everyone is so small here that we can get that product out there. We can sell out. I mean, Camila is sitting over there. None of us can try her stuff right now because it went right out the door. So I think that it's evident that people want it and they're excited to try it. And yeah, everyone wants that new thing. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. I don't think we have to flip the script at all. I think that they will, people will want this. And yeah, and Kathleen is our winemaker and an incredible fermenter of all things. So that's something we're really excited about. And maybe she can talk about that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the reasons why Vermont is exciting to me is because of the access to lots of other fruit, especially like apples, different varieties, foraging for them. My background, it kind of started in craft beer and like mead and wine. So when it comes to winemaking, like honey wine is a thing, apple wine, you know, all those things are kind of on that same level. So definitely like mixing grapes and apples and aronia berries or whatever is around, because Vermont has so much like, you know, things to play with. And that excites me, you know. So I hope you want to try our co-ferments, you know, because it's gonna happen. That's what we're putting out there. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. So that's part of the story. And I love that, Willa, you were mentioning the terroir as much as for Kathleen, the co-fermentation. It's all about the terroir, the magic that is Vermont winemaking. We do have another question. It is from Jennifer Bellage, and I totally butchered your name, so last name apologies. But what does Savoie taste like? Is it a hybrid besides being disease resistant and hardy? She wants to know what is there to know about it? And what can you compare it to in terms of a style of wine or varietal from the new world or old world?
Oh, I just was looking at.
Oh, Cami, you are not muted. Now you can speak. There you go.
Okay. I was just looking at its family tree the other day, and I'm completely spacing on what was in there. I'll have to think about that. Okay. Wow. To compare it to an old world or new world wine, I am having a hard time thinking about that. I can tell you that the one that I made, when we harvested it, we harvested it too early and it was super high in acidity. So I basically made it into a rosé. But it's just like, the one that I made was super lean and light and lots of acidity, of course, lots of fruit and really beautiful nose. I'm having a hard time thinking of things to compare it to. So I might have to think on that one for a little bit.
No, I think that's a perfect story. It's right. The idea is that as we said, hybrids and co-fermentations, they're really rich and part of the story. That it is more is production is being able to be put out there, and that will have the opportunity to get it in hands for consumers and more trade professionals. That will become normal, right? Because folks will then be able to say like, oh, I don't need the Chardonnay. Give me a glass of whatever that varietal is, and making them more comfortable. But that is really only going to happen when we look to the future. So I'll ask this again to the group. What do you want Vermont wine to be known for when we're thinking about 10, 15 years down the road?
I know what I want Vermont wine to be known for. One of Kathleen, as Grace was just saying, Kathleen is this master fermenter. And so it's like, okay, we have that aspect of it. We have found places to get grapes, but what I want Vermont wine to be known for is just kindness and community. I think that a lot of the wine world historically, going back to the old world, it's these chateaus that are all vying for the #1 spot, or these laws that are sequestering different levels of people, mostly based off of class. And I want Vermont to be a place where you can be an agricultural worker and an owner and, just be able to live a good, solid life, and have that across the board for everyone. Vermont is full of really progressive people, and I think that democratic workplaces are, the thing of the future, and that's why we have formed as a worker cooperative. And I really think that, or I hope that in doing that, other people who are trying to scale up their business will see that sharing in the success and sharing in the profit is just as sweet as doing it by yourself. So that's what I hope for.
Perfect. We could actually take a pause there, because I think that's an interesting, the labor, you as well as Grace have touched upon it, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to expand on it a bit more. The challenges with labor that you've seen or experienced when working in your profession, and why everyone has come together to create this co-op.
Okay, I love talking, so I'll go. So, I think we all have like a lot of experiences, or at least maybe it's just me, but like, at least we three have a lot of experiences in toxic workplaces, like having toxic power dynamics. And that's just the way that capitalism has structured labor, right? And so like normally the way that the wine world works out is like you have someone with money or access to money, and they have a well-articulated idea. It doesn't have to be a good idea. And they implement it in like the most basic form. And then they hope that there is like some form of like trickle down organizational infrastructure. And, you know, I've seen this happen time and again at any industry I have worked in. Like, you know, a lot of people go into creating a new business with the hope of success through the lens of fame and fortune, and not success through the lens of being able to support their community and support their employees. And so we have formed Calce Wine Cooperative with the goal of finding a better professional formula. And so, you know, we want to have the organization be more like a living document, you know, not rigid, but we want everyone who will come on and after trial period be an equal owner and have an equal vote, you know, one worker, one vote. You know, we want to be able to enact change and be flexible and be compassionate of work-life balance and prioritize comfortable wages as opposed to, you know, the seasonal workers getting paid a livable wage, whereas like us as founders have taken ourselves to the C-suite and are buying boats and 4 houses. You know, that's not a successful business. If you are running away with all of this money and there are people that are working for you that can't put food on the table, you're a failure. Like, that is what I believe. And so I think that our moral and our democratic foundation for the business is what is going to drive us to create the next world of wine.
If I could add quickly to that, yeah, 100%. And also just, and maybe it harkens back to what I was saying before about not having pursued traditional education. And in my career path, like a lot of times working for men and feeling like I needed to clean up messes constantly and bend over backwards. I mean, the service industry is filled with caretakers. You know, that's what we do. And a lot of times that's women. And I always had this imposter syndrome. And the one thing that people keep telling me, you have to ask for what you want. You need to ask for that raise. You need to go in there and like demand your worth. And I'm like, why don't they just recognize it? Why do I have to transition who I am to fit this like corporate structure that, you know, it's, you know, begging for pennies. And so the cooperative structure, you give people what they're worth, and that's set, you know. We are all in this together. So one of the things about a worker co-op is someone will work for like designated a year, although that might be a seasonal worker or, you know, however that comes out, number of hours. And then they have the opportunity to join as worker owner. And so it's not just that like they have to prove themselves, it's that you have to prove yourself to them. Like, you know, what an incredible ask for someone to buy into your business, to join you. And so that kind of reciprocity is what just stimulates me with this. I'm so excited for that. And it feels right. It feels like the right way to go about it. And also just like kind of tearing down that elitist structure of winemaking. You know, it still is that even in Vermont, generally land access is expensive. We have a lot of tools out there to help people access land, but you know, you're still far behind because if you're planting grapes, it's going to take a while, you know? So this is just one of those ways that we can kind of level the playing field. And as Justine said, if it's not working, then it's not working, and it's not, you know, but we need equity for it to work.
That is, it's being well received in the comments. I think that each of you, what you're doing, it is admirable, but you're helping to shape and change the industry from within, and leading with your truth and leading with action and not just saying it. Now, do you believe that there will be opportunity for others to actually take the similar approach? We'll just ask this final question and we'll go back to my original one.
100%. 100%. But, you know, the thing with all of the work that we're doing, it's not work in the traditional sense of like hours that you're sitting in front of a desk. Mm-hmm. We are pouring our souls into this. This is 100% emotional labor, which is something that traditionally in the capitalist system is unpaid. So everything that we're doing, all of the thought that we're putting into this in that traditional, hierarchy isn't valuable, but we are making the argument that it is the most valuable. The emotional labor is the number one thing that should be paid for, and everything else, if you are communicating well, if you are respecting the time and the effort of other people, the rest will come together. You need to have open and honest communication. You need to lean into hard conversations and tensions. And to do that, you need to feel like you're on an equal playing field with people. And so is it easy? No. Do I think that a lot of people will be able to do it? Absolutely not. But do I think that every single second that I am putting into this is worth it for, if even just one person comes out of this panel or comes away from like a tasting room or, anything like that, thinking like, hey, this sounds like the right thing to do, then I think it's worth it.
It really is truly something special that you're creating. So I do hope that everyone this stays with each of us. And so when we are in rooms and we are in conversations, we can look to your project and say like, let's keep an eye on this, let's watch it, and give chance to others to say like, oh yeah, let's play around with this idea and actually talk about it. And so the action, the industry blew up last summer. It needed to self-implode. And I think what you're doing, as I said, you're leading by your truth, and you are working together to make sure it's not performative actions and that something is set into stone, and that you are really being leaders. And that is why, again, you all are reflective of the Voices of Vermont, because you're so in tune for what community is. And within community, you have togetherness, and then that will propel you for success. And giving opportunities to those that traditionally have been shut out from the industry. And let's go back to my original question. We have about, just 25 minutes left. So if anyone has additional questions, please drop in the Q&A box. Let's go back to what I was asking before. So what do you hope Vermont is known for? We just had this beautiful conversation, but outside of that, outside of the balance and the co-op nature and changing and challenging capitalism as it relates to wine, what do you want to see the industry look like and be known for in the next 15 years? Hold on one second, Cami. Okay. There you go.
Well, for one, versatility and pushing boundaries. Definitely. There's so much that hybrids can do. I don't think that there isn't, so much. There's so much oxidative styles of wines, sparkling, red, still, whatever. It's amazing. And I really want it to be known for that and not to undermine or have doubts about it. And I think with what we're doing here, that's definitely, we're pushing the boundaries, and I really want Vermont to be known for that.
Fantastic. Kendra or Willa, anything to add?
I really agree with Camila. There are specific types of wine that we've all made that we love, but I think, why do we have to be pigeonholed into just, one style of wine, just be known for this one thing? And I think just highlighting the versatility is really exciting. I think I told you all this in one of the pre-meetings, is I was tasting with a sommelier the other day, and he asked me specifically that, and kind of caught me off guard about like styles. What style of wine do you think Vermont is going to be known for? And I wish I had said, just kind of a plethora of styles, but I do think we're making multiple producers are making some really awesome Lambright style sparkling red wines, pet nats, and traditional style. There's some of my favorite wines that we've made, and so who knows? But I think we're going to be known for just more than one style, for sure.
Well, I would hope so, because you guys have all of these grapes, like you, and the crow fermentation, so various hybrids. No one needs any more Chardonnay. that can be laid to bed. Anyone else? No.
I would say
yeah, go ahead.
what the
No, go ahead. Sorry.
what is clear in this panel and what we're hoping to get to too is, and Whitney, you mentioned this before, but grower-led winemaking, not separating the agriculture from the wine, which I think has happened so many places. People have no idea what the process of growing grapes looks like. You know, they can ignore the labor, they can ignore the process, they can ignore the growing methods. And Vermont, we do not do that. You know, time and time again, it's been proven if you're not authentic, you're not going to hack it here. And so I would, and in the same vein, it goes back to also just making sure people get land access and that we support that and we all support that for one another so that we can plant more vines. We need more vines, and we need the growers themselves to be working those vineyards. So that's, I hope we're known for that.
Mm-hmm.
Grace, that's an excellent point. And what you mentioned in there is the tightness that you are growing the grapes and you are actually making the wine. Like it's one, you're really close to the entire process from grape to glass. What do you think is there that could be flipped and really educate for the consumer? Because within natural wine, that is it is a nomenclature that is very confusing for folks. And do you believe that by having more growers that are able to be in the position of what you just described, that is going to help move the conversation so the community and consumers will be able to understand, like, okay, it's not industrial wine, or understand truly what industrial wine is versus something that is artisanal, smaller producers, and therefore that's why you're paying the premium and it's all worth it because you're feeding an ecosystem of sustainability.
I think, I don't know if that was a question for me, but it, I think anybody could answer that here, but I think that's absolutely, that we can do that in Vermont. We already have policies, like if you go to a farmer's market, they require that the actual producer is the one vending at the table. You know, a lot of them do. And so we just are very, we're connected to that culture. Plus, I mean, I don't think any one of us could really put up the veil of being an industrial grower or any kind of, you know, it's just one photo and you know, or the sellouts that people are seeing, you know, because the production's so small. And I think that will remain the case, but I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks too.
Anyone else? I'm happy to take you off mute if you would like to add. No? Okay, but that's fine. You know, this has been a fantastic conversation. Let's see, we don't have any additional questions, but yeah, I will get this note, Jennifer, over to Camila because she is not able to see the Q&A on her phone. So I will just like to say thank you for everyone for your time today. This has been a great conversation. We do hope that you've enjoyed it and that you are going to be with us the duration of this weekend. Huge thanks to Pamela, all the other organizers, and to you, our guests. So after this, at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or 10, because it is nearing my bedtime here in DC, we have the New Voices in California Wine. So it will be the follow-up conversation and a really nice balance to see, you know, what we've just discussed here, the new voices within Vermont wine, really intrinsically in that story is the story of community. It's a story about progress, and it's a story about inclusivity, and inclusivity of not only people, but also for grape varietals. And that is important as we are talking about the story of us and this industry, and that is a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for your time, and I do hope that you tune in, and thank you again for Molly's Bottle Shop and everyone else. So with that, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.